The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hey there. Thank you so much for joining the conversation on Ready, Set, Respond. I'm your host, Carla Alicea, Director of Client Performance with Apartment Ratings and Satisfax. And I'm so grateful to be here with you today and every month as we discuss topics that impact your community. These conversations are designed to have a little something for everyone, so I hope you and your teammates will join in, participate in our audience polls, and take away insights to improve your operations. At the end of the program, don't forget to head on over to the Satisfax page on either Facebook or Instagram, where you can add a comment and share your biggest takeaway from today's conversation for a chance to win a $50 gift card. Now, you might know that last week was Fire Prevention Week. It was October 8th through the 14th, and the theme this year was Cooking Safety Starts With You. If you're not familiar with Fire Prevention Week, it's promoted by the National Fire Protection Association, and they even have a hashtag, which is Fire Prevention Week, that you can follow and use in your safety posts for your community's social media. Safety is actually a very big topic for renters and for apartment owners alike. In fact, it's so important to renters that it's one of the 6 categories renters rate on your Apartment Ratings Epic report card. So I thought what we would do today is we talk with a seasoned risk management professional who's had a solid background in risk management across multiple industries, including multifamily, affordable, and military housing. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about strategies for raising awareness and preventing apartment fires. So coming up, That's My Job guest, Shawn Thornton, will join the conversation. But first, it's time for our Ready, Set, Respond polls. We want to hear from you. So to participate, pull out your phones and scan that QR code on the screen. Or you could head over to slido.com and enter the code 2708143. Now, if you're new to the conversation, our polls are opinion polls. So keep that in mind that there are no right or wrong answers. They're just honest ones. So when you see the poll on your screen, we want your honest feedback. All right? Are you ready? Okay, we're going to get started. Our first Ready, Set, Respond poll question is, do you personally have have you conducted a fire drill at your community within the last 12 months? Yes or no? So this is in the last year, have you done a fire drill? And if you don't work at a community, maybe you work at a corporate office, go ahead and say yes if you had a fire drill at your corporate office in the last 12 months. So we've got 22, 26 people responding already, 85% saying no. I wonder what Shawn's going to have to say about that. 27%. All right. So maybe we can share some good ideas for a good fire drill. All right, our next question. Do you personally have a fire escape plan for your household? And whether you live in a home or an apartment, do you know what to do in the event of a fire? Do you know where you're going to go? Do you know where you're going to meet? Have you talked about it as a family or with your roommates? We've got 70%, 60%, 68% saying yes, that's wonderful. Still a few out there that haven't thought about that yet. So maybe we can share some tips that'll help you to be more prepared. Awesome. Good stuff. All right, our last question, and this is going to be a rating scale question. I want to know on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not confident and 5 being extremely confident, how confident are you about using a fire extinguisher properly? Have you ever used one before? Have you read the directions? We've got 42, 38% extremely confident, 25% very. We have a couple that are moderately confident, slightly confident. All right, so we're across the board. And I imagine if we were asking the residents or your residents these same questions, we might get about that same mixed reaction, right? Some people feeling very confident about using a fire extinguisher, some not so much. So let's talk about that. Let's bring out Shawn. Shawn, are you ready to join the conversation?
I am. Thank
Well,
you, Carla.
welcome.
So, thank you for having me, and it is great to be here. And yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it was so nice. Maria, our last guest from last month, had mentioned that she had worked with you at a couple of different companies for um, loss prevention and risk management, and that she just said, you have to talk to Shawn. He has a passion for this topic. And I'm so grateful that we were able to connect, because when I started to look at the data, let's do the numbers around why are we talking about this topic in the first place. You know, fire loss is a big deal in property management. It accounts for almost over a year's time, $8.8 billion of loss, over 11,000 injuries, over 2,800 deaths. So it's a big deal, and we really want to make sure that we all have the information, that it's top of mind, and that we're prepared. Um, Tell us a little bit about your experience. What was one of the most impactful incidents that you've ever experienced when you worked in multifamily?
you know, it's funny. One of the most impactful events, and I, as a risk manager, you're the insurance guy. You see all of the damage across natural disasters, fires, everything else. And the most impactful to me was actually a fire event. It was a fire event that we had at a property in Ohio. It was a 10-story building, affordable housing, and it was a cooking fire.
Mm.
The
Hmm.
the way the story came about was the resident had put something on the stove to cook, had laid down to just for a moment to rest, had fallen asleep, and the item was left cooking on the stove, and it combusted.
Wow.
The fire spread. It was like I said, said it was a 10-story building. The apartment was on about the fifth floor, and the fire spread. Um, and the sad part about all of this was there was a firefighter who was helping to fight the blaze lost their life as a
Oh,
result of this fire that could have been prevented with some education. Um, you don't get over that kind of event, and you remember it uh, just not only for the loss, but the impact to not only all of the other families that were living in that building, but to the organization as a whole,
yeah.
because we ended up, not only having to relocate all of the families because the building was offline for quite some time. You had all the legal investigations and that kind of thing that went along with the fire, and then just having, from an organization, you couldn't use the property for quite some time. So, and to think about it, it was a cooking fire.
Yeah. And that's what this graph is showing from 2012 to 2021. It looks like cooking fires by far, outnumber any of the other types of fires in residential buildings. And that's a pretty dramatic, um, gap in what is starting fires. And no wonder Fire Prevention Week was you can prevent cooking fires as their theme, because it's the leading cause, 170,000 in 2021 alone.
Exactly. And one of the other things that I really have always enjoyed about October being Fire Prevention Month, and you
Hmm.
really focus on fire prevention, because if you think about it, and the data shows it here, the largest number is with cooking fires, and we're coming into the holiday season. So there is an opportunity to really take the Fire Prevention Month, but talk about the holidays, talk about cooking safety, and that's where you can have some fun events to not only educate residents on how to properly cook, you know, and I'm sure some of the people on the call can even attest to this, because a lot of times maybe some of those less dramatic cooking fires are stove fires. So they're not cooktop fires, but they're actually in the stove. So luckily they're somewhat contained to just the stove itself. But a lot of times people will put food in the stove or put a turkey in the stove and cook it until it combusts. Or if you're not cleaning your stove properly, then the grease buildup inside the stove with the heat and all that can cause a combustion. But there's that great opportunity to use October to help educate and make it a fun event for residents. We used to always try to make it almost while we're trying to deliver a serious message, you make it interesting and you make it fun.
Exactly. Absolutely. Entertain and educate at the same time. That's what I always say.
Exactly. And people remember it.
Yep.
If
Yep.
you deliver a dry presentation, people aren't going to remember what you talked about. But if you make it fun and use some interesting or some fun anecdotes, or you engage your audience, they're more likely to remember.
Now, we started out with a poll question. You know, in the last 12 months, have you conducted a fire drill at your community? And we had the overwhelming amount of respondents say, no, we haven't conducted one. Now, I remember every year my fire equipment needed certain certifications, and I would have a fire company come out and do the certifications. But I was trying to think if at that same time they conducted a fire drill. And I don't remember ever doing a fire drill that involved the residents or even my team, you know, the other associates that were working at the community. So in terms of quarterly preventative maintenance or annual preventative maintenance, is there any kind of fire safety checklist that teams should be following?
You know, a lot of associations and organizations will provide some best practices and guidelines, such as the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. They'll provide those kinds of best practices. OSHA also provides some standards and some guidelines for it. But really, you look at taking a combination of that. Is there a checklist per se? I think a lot of times what we did was look at some of these best practices, and we looked at some of these practices and just, sorry about that. I got another alarm going off.
Hopefully it's not a fire alarm.
No, it's my computer going off in the other room. But we looked at those best practices, and then we created our own checklist. And what are some of those things that you can do? What should we be checking? And Carla, to your point, we do the fire alarm testing. We check fire extinguishers. You know, it's a periodic check. That's a monthly check on our requirements. We're supposed to check our fire alarms regularly. So when we're having the companies come out and do these things, this is where we used it as an opportunity. It's a great idea to, while you're doing these checks, have a fire drill. And you can make it, again, a community event. Most people don't do it, quite frankly, because a lot of times it's difficult to get your residents to participate. And most of the residents won't participate, and you can't force them to. So that's where you get creative and you kind of make it, you know, we would a lot of times have the fire department come out. They're testing the alarms, they're testing some of the equipment. We bill it as, hey, come out, learn how to use a fire extinguisher. I noticed, you know, in the poll, a lot of people said they were very confident in using a fire extinguisher. But I think you'll be surprised at there's there's a lot of people that say they're confident in using the fire extinguisher when it's hanging on the wall. But when you get into an event where your adrenaline's pumping, a lot of distractions, or a lot of external influences that are impacting you, and then all of a sudden it becomes a little more difficult to remember exactly how to do it. And I've seen people where they'll try to use the fire extinguisher, and a lot of people, you'll try to pull the pin out, and people forget, okay, it's zip tied in. That'll break. You just have to put a little elbow behind it.
Mm.
It's designed to do that so that the pin doesn't accidentally fall out. But you don't think about it in the excitement, in the, no pun
You get
intended,
flustered.
moments. You get flustered. You try to pull the pin. It doesn't come out. You drop the fire extinguisher and go on somewhere else. Or depending on the type of fire extinguisher it is, how do you use it? Where does the agent come out of the extinguisher? A lot of people, there's not the hose attached to many of the fire extinguishers, so you don't think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I've recently been seeing a lot of TV commercials about fire blankets for kitchen fires. Have you been seeing those?
I've seen the commercials, and quite frankly, I personally haven't. I have one for home, but then I'm a risk manager, so if there's something to have, if you know how to use them, I think they can be a great thing.
Could be a good move-in gift.
And a great move-in gift. And it can be a great thing to go along with what's your personal fire prevention
plan. Yeah. Back to the fire drills, just because I've never done one, and a lot of our audience haven't either, at least not in the last year. When they're getting ready to do a fire drill, are there any best practices for communication either before, during, or after the drill? Or is there a better time of the year to conduct a fire drill than other times, or a day of the week?
I think probably one of the best ways to answer that question is poll your residents. Find out what is their interest level. Most communities kind of know the residents. They know the comings and goings. They know when those good times would be. And your local weather, because a lot of it's going to hinge around weather. And Carla, we were talking about that earlier. You live in the southern part of the country. I live in the northern part of the country, and even right now, there's probably a good 40-degree difference in our temperatures. So you want to make sure that you balance that with what's a good time, because obviously when the snow is blowing and you don't want to pick that time of year for your residents, because they definitely won't participate. Or if it's sweltering hot, similarly, they're not going to want us to go outside during that time either. So you want to pick that, maybe one of those shoulder seasons, fall or spring, where the weather's nice. You have pretty decent weather. The rain hasn't really started, or it's not overly hot, or the wind blowing, that kind of stuff, to where your residents want to be out. And then you just make it an event. Couple that with a visit from the fire department, the local fire department. Find out what their interest level is to come and help you do these things. Now, they may or may not conduct the fire drill for you, but they can provide you some best practice. They can also do some demonstrations for you. They can make it exciting, because when a fire truck shows up, everybody's interested. They want to know what's going on.
Oh my gosh.
That's a good opportunity for kids.
Absolutely. In my neighborhood, every year during the holidays, our fire department decks out this beautiful fire truck with all these Christmas lights. They put a Santa Claus on top, and they just drive around the neighborhood with their siren and with Christmas music on. And then the fire people are walking around the truck handing out leaflets of educational awareness information to the residents in our neighborhood. And it's something we look forward to every year. It's so funny. I'm a grown adult, but when I see that fire truck, I run out there and I'm very excited to see it. So
because
I am.
it's fun. And like I said, a lot of times you think about the firefighters, the first responders, most of the time they get to interact when they're called to interact with the public is during a crisis or an emergency. So for them to have the opportunity to interact with a community and it's not a crisis or an emergency, that's a great opportunity for them.
So it's just call your local station and ask them, how they're willing to get involved. What's the process there?
Yeah, each fire district or each fire jurisdiction is going to be different. Some may have um, a community liaison, and everything would be coordinated through them. A lot of the fire departments, depending on the size of the community, you can call the fire station directly, and somebody there will help coordinate. And if they don't know, if you call your local fire department and that's not the right place, they'll gladly direct you or redirect you to it, because that helps them out. The more the residents know how to stay safe and how to prevent fires, the more they don't have to respond to crises.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it keeps it top of mind for the residents as well. And it leads to that sense of safety that they feel because they're getting that reassurance, information about what to do should an incident occur.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have some tips here on the screen for different events that you can host and different topics you can use in either your community blog or newsletters or email blasts. And what's really great, Shawn, is you turned me on to the National Fire Protection Association. And then there's another one on the next screen. I'll leave this up here. But these two resources that you shared, they actually have a lot of content for, apartment managers and associations, residential buildings that you can just download for free. They've already created it. You don't have to worry about redesigning it or coming up with the content yourself. They have all sorts of flyers. They have them in multiple languages. So if you guys are interested in checking out some of the resources, if you want to scan that QR code, that'll take you to one toolkit from the nfpa.org. And then I have another one on this slide, and this is from the USFA. So what is that? The U.S. Fire Administration. Yep. They even have videos that you can post to your social media pages on, how to plan and prevent, how to get out of an apartment when there's a fire, what to do when you're testing your smoke alarms. And I imagine insurance companies really value this type of content being shared with the residents.
Oh, they absolutely do. And I want to put before I jump in and talk about the extremely exciting topic of insurance, because again, I can't help myself, but I want to put in a quick plug with the U.S. Fire Administration. NFPA and the U.S. Fire Administration are both really awesome places and real valuable resources to just go in and get all kinds of good free information, Carla, like you were mentioning. But the U.S. Fire Administration has a program that I was poking around. It's new. I don't recall seeing it before when I have been on their websites, but it's their Community Risk Reduction Program. And if you go into their website and you just search for Community Risk Reduction Program, that is a really interesting way for communities at a grassroots level across the spectrum, not just fire safety, but security and a bunch of different networks to really create a safe community. And they call it a risk reduction program. So you take a look at it if you're in, anybody's interested in that kind of approach. But Carla, the other thing about insurance companies, your insurance companies love this sort of stuff, because the more proactive that the community is, that is an opportunity, that is helpful for your insurance program to save on loss. And they call it your insurance, they have a really unique word for that in your insurance world. It's called a risk reduction program. But they're very, very strong proponents of that. And sometimes and you have to ask about it, but a lot of times an organization's liability or property policies will have a budget line item built into the cost of the insurance for, it's called risk management tools. And a lot of times the insurance carriers themselves have on staff risk managers to assist with putting together fire safety programs, any kind of risk reduction program that the community may have. So, this is an opportunity to not only look at these two resources, but also leverage your insurance carriers to come up with a really good program. And I think we'll probably talk about it here in a minute, but a lot of this stuff too, depending on how your organization's structured, starting at grassroots is really the way to go. So, a lot of times people will try to look at this from a corporate perspective and try to do everything all at once. And it gets daunting and overwhelming, and then people tend to run out of steam on it. But if you take one community that maybe has somebody very passionate about fire safety and community risk reduction, and you start there and you kind of build it and you figure out what will work for your community, that's a manageable program. And a lot of times your corporate staff will be able to help and support that because it's smaller. You learn from it, and then you can just replicate that if you have multiple properties.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you had mentioned earlier the idea of surveying your residents. And I think that's really timely because Satisfax believes that when it comes to fire safety, it's a matter of the utmost importance. So you and I collaborated and we actually developed a new flex survey for fire safety awareness that is available now for our clients. It's a really great way to help on-site teams identify the most impactful actions that they can take to enhance that safety for their residents. And that's why I'm actually really excited to share with our audience today that we're making this fire safety awareness survey available to you for attending, for the individuals who've attended live today. You're going to get an email after this session, after the webinar is over. You'll get an email with a link and a code, and you can actually download all 15 questions in this fire safety awareness survey. And if you know Satisfax, we don't normally give out our question list, but again, we think that this topic is so important. We're going to make that question list available to all those who attended this session. Now, a few things. If you use this survey independently, or if you prefer, you can connect with your Satisfax sales rep and ask them about us administering it for you through our flex surveys. And what that'll do is it'll enable not only for you individually as a community to get all of those results into your exchange, but as a company, if they wanted to run this survey across multiple communities, you can aggregate all of that data in exchange and have all of that granular level data available for interpretation. So again, if this is something you are interested in, make sure you look out for that post email. And just a quick note, if you decide not to use Satisfax to administer this survey, please, please, please make sure that you get the proper approvals before sending it out to any of your residents. Make sure that aligns with your company's best practices. But we're excited to offer this valuable resource to you. Again, Shawn worked with us on the question sets. These are just a few of the questions on the screen, and that is available as part of our Flex survey templates. And if you're familiar with satisfaction, you know that our Flex surveys are a really great way to go above and beyond those satisfaction surveys. You know, we do resident satisfaction and employee satisfaction surveys. Sometimes you'll have other questions, like maybe you want to know more about your residents' social media habits, or you want to know more about how employees feel about a specific topic, maybe DEI. We have Flex surveys for that. And now, thanks to Shawn, we can add a fire safety awareness survey to our Flex repertoire. So thank you so much, Shawn, for collaborating with us on this very important awareness survey.
No, and I'm so glad to be a part of that, because Carla, like you mentioned, this is, you know, the topic is so very important. And a lot of times, you know, as part of a community team, we're real focused on learning more about what is important to our residents. And we ask a lot of different things of what's important to them. And now we have the opportunity to find out, how safe do you feel? Do you understand, or do you have a fire plan? And are you aware of how to do this? And, you know, a lot of times I want a little plug about the importance of understanding what your residents know or don't know. I'm gonna go back to the fire that I used at the beginning, my fire example from Ohio. And, you know, one of the most interesting attributes when we were doing the investigations, we were looking at, you know, obviously the cause and this kind of thing, but something that came up, the fire alarm wasn't pulled from the 5th floor where the fire occurred.
Oh, that's interesting.
The fire alarm was pulled from the 1st floor.
Huh.
And, you know, a lot of people asked, as part of the investigation, kind of queried the residents, and they weren't sure. Either they got hyped in the matter during the moment and forgot where the fire alarms were located, but nobody remembered or thought about pulling it, or until somebody on the 1st floor actually pulled the fire alarm.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, a survey is a really great way to create curiosity. So if on the survey, I think one of the questions is, do you know where the fire alarm is located, right? Maybe they never even thought to identify where is the closest fire alarm. After taking the survey, they may make note as they're walking out to their car or going down the elevator where that fire alarm is, because it's fresh in their mind. So we hope you guys will, enjoy that resource. Definitely reach out to your sales rep if you want more information about how we can help make that process smooth and very transparent for your organization in your Exchange dashboard. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for joining the conversation today about fire safety planning and preventing. And of course, we like to play a game with our guests called Fact or Fiction. I've got some questions for you, but our audience, they're going to play along. They can play along using that Slido app if you want to get that up and running again. Audience, there's the QR code and the code to get back on Slido. So Shawn, I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions about fire safety, and you just need to let me know if I'm fibbing or if I'm telling the truth. Did I make this up, or is this an actual fact? Are you ready to play?
All righty, I'm nervous about this.
Oh, you don't have to be nervous. I made these easy. So, fact or fiction, most apartment fires are caused by easily avoidable human errors and therefore are often preventable.
Well, I actually think my example from earlier is a testament that most fires are actually preventable.
Yep.
And they're caused by human error.
Yep. So you're going to say that's a fact?
I'm going to say that's a fact.
And you are right, and so is our audience. Way to go, guys. Let's go to our next fact or fiction question. Smoke detectors older than 10 years need to be replaced, as do batteries older than 6 months. Fact or fiction?
I think we all know that when you change your clocks forward or back, you also change your batteries and smoke detectors, and that's every 6 months. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is the smoke detectors that are older than 10 years definitely need to be replaced. So I'm going to say that is a fact.
That is a fact, absolutely. And it's interesting because a lot of the times we'll do annual unit inspections. So at that time, we'll change out the filters, we'll change out the batteries and the smoke alarms, but that's only once a year. So we need to make sure that we're encouraging our residents at least another time during the year to change out those batteries. All right, our last fact or fiction question for you, Shawn. Fire extinguishers have an expiration date. Fact or fiction?
And this is a little known. This is a little known fact, but this is true. Fire extinguishers do have an expiration date, and you should check on that. This is
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, when I've lived in apartment communities, I've seen the fire boxes in the hallways with the hoses and the fire extinguishers, but sometimes residents may invest in their own fire extinguisher. So making sure that they're aware of their own equipment's expiration date and reminding them every once in a while to check for that and to re-up that fire extinguisher if it's past its due date. So yes, that is a fact. And you guys are fire experts as well, so you all got it right. So that is great. Shawn, again, thank you so much for joining the conversation. We truly appreciate all of the insights and stories you shared with us today to reinforce the importance of fire safety and prevention at our communities. Guys, it's getting to the end of our program, so don't forget that you could head over to Instagram and Facebook, and we'll have a post up that you can add a comment to. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was about fire safety, and then all entries will be due by 5 p.m. Pacific time tonight, and our judges are standing by to give out that $50 gift card. Also, don't forget to register for our next conversation. You can go to satisfax.com/webinars. November is a month for giving thanks. So I've invited one of the most gracious people I know to come talk to us about using gratitude and service as a way to increase our closing ratios and our resident retention rates. So you're not going to want to miss this. It's the VP of Sales for Contract Carpet. His name is Mark Lacey. He's a gem. He's a sales superstar, and he's one of the kindest, most gracious people I think I've ever met, and I cannot wait to introduce you to him. This is going to be a great conversation, especially for all those leasing agents and sales teams and customer service-oriented team members. You're not going to want to miss this program. All right, guys. All good things must come to an end, and we have reached the end of our program. So do me a favor and help our program improve by completing the closing survey before you log off. Your feedback's important to us. Thank you for joining the conversation today. I'm Carla Alicea, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.